Oh, welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker. You are listening to episode 196. We're creeping up on 200 episodes here. Can you believe it? Today is Sunday, June the 21st. And of course, if you guys want to catch a show live, subscribe on Facebook or YouTube and turn on your notifications. Sunday, June 21st, Father's Day. So a very happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there doing the right thing. And I always have to clarify that. I feel like Father's Day is something that's a privilege to be able to celebrate. It's something that's earned. It's not something that should be automatic, because my personal feeling, and I haven't been a father very long, but being a father is really challenging and really exhausting if you give a shit. And if you don't, then it's not. And you're not doing it right, probably. In any case, we got some fights to talk about. But before we do that, let me welcome all the way from New Jersey, Jeff, the Animal Wilson. Jeff, happy Father's Day, just in case, my man.
Thanks. Hopefully we're not there yet, Bill. But happy Father's Day to you, man. I always see you posting the pictures and the Instagram stories with the baby. I love it. I love that you're involved. Not everybody can say that about their dad. So, Bill, I don't know how to be a dad, but I assume you're doing a good job.
I don't either, Jeff. It's a very much learn as you go. And of course, all the stuff that goes on social media, for those of you who are friendly with me on my personal social media, that's only the good stuff, obviously. But man, there are some trying times. Especially with a toddler, where they're kind of exploring new feelings and new ways just to go about existing in this world, and they're growing and feeling things that they don't understand, and they get frustrated, and there are just some days, man. I had a day yesterday where I was couldn't do anything right, and you have a lot of those, but it really forces you to feel like you earned the good moments, like all the stuff that you do see on social media, like the hugs and the singing and the dancing and trying on dresses and being goofy and silly, just being a dad. Really makes you feel like you earn those moments by going through the trials and tribulations of toddlerhood, which I never knew how difficult it would be. So again, for all the dads out there who are doing it full time and don't just call it in, don't just phone it in. Happy Father's Day to all of you. Happy Father's Day to my dad. I know you watch occasionally. Happy Father's Day to Mr. Animal Wilson. And and all the other dads out there. Hope you guys get a chance to do some barbecuing today and relax, forget about some of the craziness going on in the world. Jeff, I'm at war here in Florida, and about this war. It's against mosquitoes, and as we're starting the rainy season again, the mosquitoes are coming back full force, and I'm losing a lot of battles here, Jeff. I'm not giving up on the war, but it's a fight, man. I went for a bike ride to a local park yesterday, and had the kiddo on the front of the bike, and she likes to ride the bike, and we're going through the park, and there's like this little trail where you can see gopher tortoises. They come out, they burrow in the ground, and they'll pop out, and you can't get too close to them because they run away, and they're also protected, so you can't touch them or anything. But we stopped to look at this tortoise, and all of a sudden I just felt like I was being stuck with like acupuncture needles. Like I'd never felt anything like this before, or like bee stings. These mosquitoes went up my shirt, Jeff, and they were in there, and I had shorts on. They chewed me alive, and I'm like, I couldn't start pedaling the bike fast enough. I almost couldn't react. And I'm like trying to pedal the bike and balance her and like swat mosquitoes away from her and try and swat the ones inside my shirt. Like I'm I must have looked like a cartoon. I I'm like trying to and of course I hit like a thing of dirt and I couldn't get the bike moving and I'm like swatting around. It was terrible, but I'm bringing up the mosquitoes because I recently a buddy of mine works for like a big exterminator company. So he hooked me up and he was going to have the outside of my house sprayed. So I'm a couple of months into it and it helps a little bit, but right next to my house is like a big wooded area. I'm on a dead end street and there's all these dense woods. So, they can't spray the whole woods. So I'm talking to this guy. He's telling me how he was a Marine, Jeff, and how when he was in the Marines, after they would eat dinner, they would come out of the chow hall and the drill sergeant, I guess, would make them line up and just let the mosquitoes eat them. He's like, you guys just got to eat, and now it's the mosquitoes' turn to eat. And they weren't allowed to swat them away. They just had to stand there and take it. I guess it was like a mental toughness thing. And if any of them would have killed a mosquito, like if they swatted it on their arm, the drill sergeant made them have a funeral for it and bury it in the sand. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. And I said to him, I could see now why you got into this line of work. And where I was going with that joke was like, you want to get revenge on these mosquitoes. And he just looks like kind of distant. He goes, yeah, gotta have something to kill. and just kind of spaced off like that.
Oh man.
And then he kind of snapped out of it and he looks at me and I could see the instant regret on his face that he had said that. And like, I get it, Jeff. I've got a dark sense of humor, but if you say something like that to the wrong person, if if you're spraying mosquitoes for one of the Karens of the world out there, that could cost you your career. I mean, luckily it was me. I'm very understanding. I have a lot of friends in the military. I know, the kind of sense of humor they develop going through something like that. And this guy, like, it was only like the second time I met him, but it did freak me out a little bit. He's like, I have something to kill. I want to like slowly back away, like that Homer Simpson where he goes into the bushes. Anyway, man. Jeff, that was a fun little lighthearted Father's Day story to share. Anything you want to share? Before we get into some fights here, or you want to just jump into it?
I don't think I can top that this week, man. so why don't we get into some fights here?
Yeah. Before we talk about the fights that did happen, we didn't have a chance to talk about the fight that never came to be. And of course, that was Matt the Steamroller Frevola and Frank the Crank Camacho. I'm really bummed. I was so bummed out from my buddy Steamroller because I know how hard he worked and he was waiting for a fight during this quarantine, trained his ass off, had to move his camp around. It was a little too restrictive in New York. He came down to Tampa. He was training in Tampa. They get all the way out to Vegas. He's on weight, ready to go. And his corner man, UFC fighter Billy Quarantillo, tested positive for coronavirus. Now, he had no symptoms. As far as I know, he still doesn't. Felt fine. And I know Billy felt horrible as well because, he wouldn't want to be the reason that Steamroller couldn't fight. And there's just not enough known about this thing. Like, even though Steamroller himself tested negative, they said, look, we don't know if this thing is living in you and incubating and it's not showing up on the test yet or whatever the case. So he had to be pulled from the fight. And, you gotta err on the side of caution with these things. But man, what a bummer, because I know, how much he put into this and he was looking real good, real sharp in the gym and everything. And that was going to be a great fight. But yeah, big bummer. Shout out to my brother-in-law, Dave Bernardino on the podcast here. Yeah, so I don't know, Jeff. What did you think when you heard Steamroller had to be pulled from the card?
Yeah, so first off, shout out to Dave, the Portuguese man of war, and excuse me, and Bill. I was super let down, man. I was super excited for the Matt Frivola fight. All those guys coming out of Tampa are tough dudes, man. Billy Q, Matt Frivola, and it's a shame because, like you said, we don't know enough about this bug or virus or whatever it is to really, say if it's okay or not.
Hmm.
We had the same issue with Jakari Swoza, where, he didn't have any symptoms, but he was carrying it apparently or whatever happened. So,
Yeah.
It's a shame, but, I think that with states, not mandating the quarantine or starting to slowly move away from that, I think we're moving somewhere in the right direction.
Yeah, it seems like they've been able to keep it pretty safe. Like they've done, I guess 4 or 5 events now, and nobody's gotten it as a result that I've heard of. Anyway, so that's good. And even with last week with Ian Heinisch, his corner man tested positive, but it was like before he got on the plane, so he just stayed behind. But then it turned out to be a false positive, so he didn't actually have it. So Ian Heinisch didn't get to have one of his corner men, but he still was able to fight. I guess between then and now, they changed the protocol where if your cornerman has it, they got to pull you, and that's unfortunate. But anyway, let's get into the fights that did happen. UFC on ESPN 11. It's headlined by the heavyweights Curtis Blaydes and Alexander Volkov. Man, the wrestling, Jeff. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of heavyweights who can wrestle like this. The heavyweights typically don't have good grappling technique. There's a small handful who have throughout the course of history. You got your Frank Mears, you got your Nogueiras, your Verdums, Fedor. But what usually happens with bigger guys is they end up muscling out of things and they don't learn proper technique. So you don't get a whole lot of technique. Even Brock Lesnar was an outstanding wrestler. Didn't have great technique. He was just a monster. Curtis Blaydes has extremely technical wrestling for a big guy. And the fact that he was able to throw Volkov around like that for 5 rounds was incredible to me. Now, I get a lot of people, including Dana White, are like, this was not an exciting fight. But for me to be able to do that to a man that size, it will never cease to impress me. If you can do that, if you can wrestle like that for 25 minutes, like I would encourage anybody to wrestle like that for 2 minutes with somebody who's not even resisting, and tell me how you feel after that. You'll be sucking wind for sure. Wrestling is one of the most exhausting, high-paced things you could do. I think the actual sport of wrestling is more tiring than the sport of MMA. If you're just talking about straight wrestling, just because of the pace. And if guys are able to translate that pace into MMA, which a lot are not able to do, you got Khabib, you got Curtis Blaydes, you got GSP, and uphold that wrestling pace for 25 minutes, that's an outstanding feat to accomplish, in my opinion. Now, I'm just one guy, and I understand that a majority of the people watching this want to see the heavyweights get in there and try and, club each other's heads off. But I was so impressed with Curtis Blaydes. Give me your thoughts on this main event here, Jeff.
Dude, I was so impressed with Curtis Blaydes. One, like you said, the wrestling, to be able to keep that up for 5 rounds. And 2, the cardio. At the end of this fight, he didn't even look that sweaty, man. Curtis Blaydes must have cardio for days, dude. I was just so impressed with him. And, it looked like Volkov was doing a little bit better on the feet. And, I'm going to admit this might not have been the most exciting fight, but Curtis Blaydes is getting in there and doing what he needs to do to get up in the rankings and put his name in the title picture, man. And I don't know if you can deny him after what he did to Volkov in that fight. This is a guy who took Derek Lewis and almost beat him for 5 rounds. So I don't think you can deny Curtis Blaydes at this point. And Bill, I would love to see him fight either Stipe or DC and see who has the better grappling and wrestling, man. Curtis Blaydes, the way he was able to just not only go for one style of takedown. You know, the double leg was working for him really well, but when it wasn't, he was going for his trips and stuff, which I love seeing, you know. And that's something we've talked about a lot is the chain wrestling, is that, you know, you have to continue to wrestle. You know, if you don't get it on the first takedown, you keep trying until you do get it. And that in itself, you know, just chaining takedowns together is exhausting, dude. I would even venture to say, like you said, wrestling is definitely more exhausting than MMA. It's definitely more exhausting than jiu-jitsu as well, man. Because in jiu-jitsu and MMA, you kind of get periods where you can rest for a little bit, for lack of a better term. But in wrestling, you're always going, dude. You're always doing something. There's no space for you to really catch your breath.
Yeah, especially if you're in there with, you have chances to rest unless you're in there with a guy like Curtis Blaydes who's just all over you. But yeah, the transition from the double legs to the trips to the body locks, I was impressed with the body locks, just picking up Volkov and throwing him. A guy is 6'7", 247 pounds, and he just throws him to the ground, you know, like he's a bag of dirt. And credit to Volkov here, because he showed some awesome cardio too. You know, he was, you know, when he wasn't getting smothered, he was coming out swinging. He may have even won that fourth round when he busted Curtis's lip open. Whatever judge gave Volkov 2 rounds, by the way, get the fuck out of here. Like that's 2 rounds. That means it was close. This fight was not close. But I love Curtis Blaydes in the post fight too, because his lip was busted open and he got a mouthful of stitches, and he goes, "Yeah, I already have a speech impediment, so I don't know how this is gonna go."
Oh man,
that was awesome, man. I'm a big fan of Curtis Blaydes. I always have been. I feel bad that he had those, you know, 2 unfortunate fights with Ngannou that will probably prevent him from getting a title shot. He's going to need one more. I have a feeling they're going to make him fight maybe the winner of Derek Lewis, Alexei Olenek, something like that. They'll probably. I would like to see him and Olenek. Have they fought before?
I don't think so, but
pull up
I also
no, they haven't.
Yeah, so that's a good one to make.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Curtis Blaydes' resume, all right, dominant win over Volkov, knocked out Junior Dos Santos in his last fight, knocked out Shamil Abdurrahimov before that, beat Justin Willis. Then there was that TKO Francis Ngannou, which was a questionable stoppage. Then he knocked out Alistair Overeem before that with elbows, beat Mark Hunt. Oh, and then he TKO'd Alexei Olenek back in November 2017. So man, he's been on a tear. To string together this many wins in a row at heavyweight is really impressive. You know, remember, this is a division where the longest reigning champion won 3 fights in a row. So it's unfortunate that he seems to be on Dana White's shit list. I don't know the backstory there. But you know, hopefully it doesn't hold him from getting to that title, because he's definitely earned it. Before we continue, Jeff, I need to have a little Father's Day toast here. The wife was nice enough to pick me up a bottle of High West bourbon here. Dave, if you're still on the broadcast, I know you're a fan of High West American Prairie bourbon. This is this whiskey comes out of Utah. So you know, all the bourbon snobs out there will be like, it's not bourbon if it doesn't come from Kentucky. And I'm like, if it says bourbon on the label, then that's what it is.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah. So it's, this is the Prairie bourbon. It's got kind of a light color there, light brown color. It's like gold. Looks like gold. Is Utah where they did all the gold rush mining, Jeff?
I think that was in California, Bill.
Well, they must have started digging in Utah before they got to California.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That part of history I'm not good with, so couldn't tell you.
This is nice. It's like a liquidy honey. Tastes good. I'm not gonna go too deep on the tasting notes, but really hits a spot right now. And you know, this will help me get ready for the rest of the day. Get some barbecuing to do. I got some snapper I'm gonna do on the grill,
nice.
Caribbean style. It's gonna be a good day, Jeff. It's gonna be a good day. The in-laws coming over. All right, co-main
I don't know
event.
how good that day is going to be, Bill. If the in-laws are coming over.
Yep. It's going to be a good day. This will help me. In any case, the co-main event here, Jeff. Holy fuck. Fight of the year, fight of ever. Forget about the fact that Josh Emmett blows out his ACL in the first 15 seconds of the fight. Which like I've done that and I know how painful it is. And this guy went and fought a war for 15 minutes after that, throwing punches, didn't look like he was hurt at all. The thing with the ACL is that it can pop and it'll only be painful if you move in certain directions. Usually it's moving at angles, but straight forward and straight back, which is pretty much how Emmett was fighting a lot of the times. He wasn't cutting a whole lot of angles. He fights coming straight at you. I think he had intended to wrestle a little bit more, and you could tell he had the advantage there, but wasn't able to do it. You can't shoot for takedowns with a blown out knee, but these guys were slinging for 15 minutes, like the pace and the shots they were absorbing, especially Burgos, because he was taking shots from Emmett that we've seen put out guys, warriors. And just my heart's racing just thinking about this fight again. So give me your thoughts on this co-main event, Jeff.
Dude, I loved it. And I know I had a previous pick for fight of the year. This fight made me forget what that pick was. I mean, dude, Shane Burgos and Josh Emmett, excuse me, they just went at it for 3 rounds. Dude, for lack of a better term, they beat the shit out of each other, and they just kept moving forward. Like, dude, as great, I honestly, I wanted both of these guys to win. Shout out to Alexander Au, listening from New Jersey. But dude, I was so excited for this fight. I mean, I honestly, really, I couldn't tell you who the winner was until the end of the 3rd round. But before that, could have been anybody's game. I had it about a round apiece, and credit to Shane Burgos, dude. He's so tough, and he was throwing just as hard as Josh Emmett was. I would have liked Shane Burgos to kind of show a little bit more head movement, but dude, he was so technical, and for me, the leg kicks were doing a lot of damage. I felt like those are really, really winning him the fight. I think that if you take away that 3rd round, maybe give it to Shane Burgos, but credit to Josh Emmett, man. He dropped him hard twice in that 3rd round, and that was just because Shane Burgos was so confident in his chin and taking all that damage. But man, I think the stock goes up for both of these guys, Bill. I want both of them to shoot up in the rankings here. Shane Burgos, I think he's been super underrated in this 145-pound division, man. I don't think you can deny him anymore. He's a really tough dude.
Yeah, for sure. And even the champ Volkanovski was tweeting he's got his eye on both of these guys, even after the fight was over and the winner was declared. I saw a lot of people calling it a draw. I could see that. If you scored the first 2 for Burgos and you give Emmett a 10-8 in the 3rd, I'm good with that. But if you give Emmett the 2nd and the 3rd, I'm good with that too. The 10-8 in the 3rd is definitely deserved. I mean, he came real close to finishing Burgos a couple of times, and it was such an exciting fight. I think the short list for fight of the year has to be Joanna and Wiley Zhang, Billy Quarantillo and Spike Carlisle, and this fight, Josh Emmett and Shane Burgos. Those are the 3 that are on my short list right now. And we usually don't talk about, whatever is of the year, but I mean, when it's this obvious, when everybody's saying it, you can't really ignore it. So awesome fight. And unfortunately for Emmett, I don't know how long he's going to be sidelined with this knee injury. Hopefully it's not as bad as his corner is predicting, that he blew out his ACL. Hopefully it's just, like a bad sprain on the tendon. instead of like a tear or something that would require surgery, because that could put him out for like a year. And he's already, been sidelined with a bunch of injuries. But yeah, man, I'd love to see both of these guys back in there. Burgos looked better in a loss than some of these guys at 145 have looked in their victories recently. So I don't disagree with you that they should both move up in the rankings. Fun fight in the bantamweight division. Raquel Pennington kind of looked like she got back to her old self against Marion Reneau. The story of this fight was the tie clinch from Pennington and those knees to the body that just drained the life out of Marion Reneau, who's really tough, and credit to her, but you could just tell that her tank was sucked dry from those knees by Pennington, and she was able to grab that tie plum pretty easily. And I think if she got a little bit more space, she didn't keep getting it up against the cage, and she could have snuck some knees through to the face. It could have been nighty-night for Marion Reneau. But yeah, I thought she looked good. Her and her partner both had big decision victories on this card. Of course, Tecia Torres. So big wins for Pride Month. Thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Raquel Pennington looked awesome in there, dude. We haven't seen her in the cage in a while, so it was good to get her and Tecia Torres on the same card. And man, that body work was working wonders for Raquel Pennington, man. You could see it, by the third round, Marion Reneau was taking some deep breaths. She didn't want to be in there anymore. So good for Raquel Pennington, back in the win column, and hopefully she can be a little bit more consistent, with everything starting to cool down a little bit.
Yeah, and it could benefit her that the champ Amanda Nunes is talking about possibly walking away because she has nothing left to achieve. I don't really see Nunes going back to 135 anyway, since she's so dominant at 145. Like, why bother cutting the weight? That could be good news for a lot of girls in that division because, she just makes everybody look like they don't even belong there. Belal Muhammad getting the unanimous decision over Lyman Good. And did it largely standing up with him, which, might surprise a lot of people. Belal is known for being a high-level grappler, but, he was in there, man. He was landing some shots. I also thought Lyman Good was going to be a lot bigger than Belal, but I always forget how big he is. I don't know why I feel that about him, but when I saw him in there and they were, like, of comparable size, and he was landing, like, some of those distance uppercuts he was landing, like really nice, clean strikes, good technique. I feel like probably the best striking we've seen from Belal Muhammad ever.
Yeah, dude, I was impressed with Belal Muhammad. His head movement was good. He didn't want to fight in a phone booth. I thought he went about this very, very intelligently. Good fight from him. And this was for me, this was a really exciting fight, Bill. This was another back and forth fight, man. Lyman Good came out really, really strong in that second round as well. So, heading into the third, I wasn't sure. I kind of had it about a round apiece. So good for Belal Muhammad and Lyman Good, both of them looked great in there. I was a little worried for Belal Muhammad just because I don't know why, Bill. I don't know if it's because he's not as, ripped, for lack of a better term, as some of the other guys in this division. But I thought Lyman Good was going to be a lot bigger than him. But Lyman Good also looks like he was drawn in like a comic book or something.
Yeah, he really does, especially like with the tattoos, and the guy's jacked. Very underrated fighter too. And he was able to survive with Belal Muhammad on his back, which not a lot of people can make that same claim. But that was a fun fight. The one that topped it for me though was the one right before it, and I think deserving of a performance bonus, which I believe he did get, and that's Jim Miller, man. What can you say about Jim Miller? I think he's got the most UFC fights and like the most bonuses, and now he's creeping up the list for most submission wins. The guy still looks sharp. I mean, this young lion, Roosevelt Roberts, was supposed to come in here and annihilate him. This was supposed to be a name on Roosevelt Roberts' resume, let's be honest. But Jim Miller, I guess nobody told him, because he came in, caught a low kick, put Roberts on his back, and then it was just that old school grappling pressure, man. Pass the guard, get on top, get the back. He got a little too high. He, slipped over the top, but grabbed that arm just in time and then winds up on his back. And Roberts is like, let me throw a hammer fist in here real quick. And Jim Miller's like, thanks. And then the way that this happened was the arm that was being armbarred was on top of the other arm, which just puts more leverage on the joint. And it also doesn't allow Roberts to tap, so he had to tap verbally. On top of that, he was trying to pick Jim up. So it's Jim's entire body weight. Usually it's just the hips pushing up and the arm being pulled down. That's the only pressure on the joint. But in this scenario, since Roberts was picking him up in the air, it was Jim's entire body weight, which probably at the time of the fight, they weighed in at 160 pounds because this was a catch weight, 170, 175 pounds. Leverage of the bottom half of your arm being separated from the top half over your other arm. I don't know if I did justice in describing that. Like, if you guys didn't see the fight, you have to watch it, and maybe you'll understand what I'm talking about. Or, maybe it's too early in the day for me to be drinking bourbon. In any case, how impressed were you with your fellow Jerseyman, Jim Miller, Jeff?
Oh, dude, I love Jim Miller. And, dude, what a submission. I mean, it looked kind of like Roosevelt Roberts was slipping out the back door, getting out from back control by Jim Miller, and then, boom, he just slaps on that armbar so fast. I mean, Roosevelt Roberts, he did the right thing at first. He was kind of holding his own arm with his free arm to keep Jim Miller from extending that arm. And as soon as he got a second, Jim Miller just cranked that armbar and boom, it was game over. Like you said, Roosevelt Roberts had both of his arms tied up, so he had to tap verbally, and that's how you know that Jim Miller had a tight armbar on him. Good for him, dude. Glad to see Jim Miller back to his old self, man. He was talking about how he was feeling a little bit more explosive lately, so good for him. Super, super excited for him, and I'm glad he got back in the win column.
Yeah, man, you got to be happy for Jim Miller with everything that he's been through with the Lyme disease. And he said he's just starting to feel like he's getting his athleticism back. How crazy is that? After 400 UFC fights, and he had that terrible Lyme disease. And it sucked the life out of him, and it looked like he might have been done for a little while. And then he comes back and has performances like this against guys who, he's supposed to be a check mark on their resume. That's what this was supposed to be. I think that's what Roosevelt Roberts expected. Credit to Roosevelt Roberts for, fighting just a couple of weeks ago. But, if you're going to go in there with Jim Miller, you got to expect a tough night.
Yeah, you got to pack a lunch, dude.
This was a fight. The one before it was one I never thought about happening. And when it was announced, I was like, wow, I never thought about that happening. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then right before it started, I was like, holy shit, this is an amazing fight. Bobby Green and Clay Guida. Guida looks like he may have lost like an eighth of a step from the days of old. Like he wasn't quite as wild with the wrestling, but like the timing's still there, man. Even without that, he was still able to get in on those takedowns, and the way he transitions from the strikes, he's got a fist in your face and then he's in on your legs. And I've always admired that about Clay Guida. Bobby Green did a good job, kind of pacing himself and not trying to punch himself out, picking his shots. So we saw a real patient Bobby Green, which was fun. And he came away with the victory. I didn't see it that way. I had scored it for Guida, but I may have to go back and rewatch it. I know the commentators were kind of saying, or kind of implying like, oh, Bobby Green's been on the the wrong side of some bad decisions in the past. And I don't know if the judges can hear that or not, and if they were influenced. But, I thought without the commentators, just watching the fight, I had scored it for Guida. But I don't know. What did you see, Jeff?
Bill, I'm kind of in the same boat. I kind of had it more for Guida because of the grappling and the wrestling, but I might have to go back and watch this one too, because Bobby Green was doing really well on the feet. So, I think I got to go back and watch this one. But still, an exciting fight nonetheless.
Yeah, man. And I have to address a comment from our buddy, Serena De Jesus here, who says it's probably too early for me to drink bourbon. But she loves us anyway. And I appreciate that. But remember, Serena, you're all the way in Vegas where it's like not even 10 a.m. yet. It's well afternoon here, and it's Father's Day. So I'm going to be sipping the rest of the show. Tecia Torres looked phenomenal against the newcomer Brianna Van Buren. I had a good feeling about Van Buren. The things I heard about her and just kind of her swagger coming into the ring. She looked so focused, so confident. She wrestled for Daniel Cormier in high school, so obviously she can grapple. And he had a lot of great things to say about her, but I think Tecia Torres just really showed her experience in here, and that was the big difference maker, in my opinion. She was able to put that veteran pressure on Van Buren that she just wasn't ready for. That's a big ask to get in there with a Tecia Torres, for your UFC debut. The tiny tornado put it on her, and she looked good, man. She looked real good. Both her and her, are they married, Jeff? I don't recall if her and Raquel Pennington are married. They live together.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that one. They might just be living together, but I'm not sure. I don't really follow relationships of celebrities.
Yeah. I'm with you, obviously. So, they both looked great on the same card, so you can't ask for more than that. You get to go home with your partner, and you both get to celebrate a victory. So that was good. And then the rest of the card, I was kind of in and out on the prelims. I did unfortunately catch Roxanne Modafferi losing a unanimous decision to Lauren Murphy. Hopefully that doesn't derail all the momentum she had coming off of that big win over Macy Barber, which is one of the most impressive things I've seen. And if you'll recall that fight, Macy had blown out her ACL in that fight, and Roxanne didn't attack it because she didn't want to do any permanent damage to her opponent. And that's just the kind of person she is. So big respect to Roxanne Modafferi. I'm sure she'll bounce back stronger from this. She always has a great attitude. Marc-Andre Barriault getting the TKO over Oskar Piechota. Gillian Robertson submits Cortney Casey after avoiding a lot of submissions herself. Catches her late in the fight, third round, 4 minutes 36 seconds. Justin James comes in on 3 days' notice to knock out Frank Camacho, who is supposed to fight Matt Steamroller Favola. So, man, shitty week for Frank Camacho. His opponent, who he had been training for a couple of weeks, pulls out, and then he gets knocked out in 40 seconds. So unfortunate for him, but great news for Justin James, who comes off the bench, with a big clubbing knockout of a guy with an incredible chin in Frank Camacho. And then before we get to the first fight, Jeff, just tell me, out of the ones I just mentioned, who impressed you the most?
Well, Bill, I'll be honest with you. I liked all three of them, but I was most impressed with Marc-Andre Barriault against Oskar Piechota here. Might be mispronouncing that name. I apologize to Oskar Piechota. But, dude, he went out there and just was moving forward the whole time, putting a lot of pressure on Piechota here and using the body shots really well, man. He was doing this thing where he would kind of fake a straight right and then hit Piechota with an uppercut, which was working really well, and Piechota just could not get Barriault's timing. So, good for Barriault. He said in the interview that he, wanted to go back to his old ways and kind of push the envelope here, which I think he did a really great job of. But any of these fights, if you missed them, go back and watch them. The prelims on this card were fantastic, which is something we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. So I'm really excited. I hope this trend continues.
Yeah, man, for sure. It was definitely an impressive win by Barriault there. So let's talk about this first fight. Austin Hubbard gets a technical TKO over Max Roskopf, who quit on the stool. Told his corner he was done. The corner tried to talk him into it, in between the second and third round, like, no, you're a champion. You got to get back out there. You got to do this. A lot of criticism coming from social media from, for the corner. We're usually quick to criticize corners who don't have the best interest of their fighters at heart. I don't think that's what happened here. I think that the corner just, wanted to see him get out there and try. Full disclosure, I did not see the fight. I only saw what happened in the corner. Jeff, you saw the fight. Do you think the corner was pushing him a little too hard to get back out there?
I'll be honest with you, Bill. I do. I think, this ended in between the second and third round, and Max Roskopf, he was getting pieced up, dude. I know his corner wanted to motivate him, but he looked exhausted. Austin Hubbard was just too much for him. I think that, Roskopf probably didn't have, as much time to train as he would have liked to. So I felt like, if he didn't, I felt like he was going to tap soon due to strikes in the third round. So I felt like his corner, was pushing him just a little too hard. Roskopf, he said a couple of times that he wanted to quit, and when they called for the stools, he was in no rush to get up. So I think that for me that was a dead end sign too. But I'm not in the moment. I can only speak as someone on the outside looking in, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. So from what I know about the situation, Roskopf has never had this feeling before where the things that he does well weren't working. And that makes you feel like giving up. A lot of times, fighters will have that feeling in the gym, or they'll have that feeling in an amateur fight, or they'll have that feeling in, their first couple of pro fights. And it's a completely natural feeling because you're like, this works against everybody. And, you can even relate, Jeff, just for jiu-jitsu, for example, like you say you have an arm bar that you catch everybody with and you roll with a new person, you go for that arm bar and they don't tap and they escape. You're like, man, I get everybody with this. Why was this guy able to get out? And it makes you, sometimes it makes you question, like, have I been doing everything wrong? And for him to have that feeling on the stool in his UFC debut, that's shitty, man. I feel bad for him. He had a big opportunity here, and he had never felt that before. He finished all of his fights pretty much in the first round by submission. So the guy's obviously a great grappler, and he's fought some legitimate promotions. He fought in Titan, FFC. He's only been in the second round one time, and that was in his first fight. And even his he has one amateur fight. So like, not enough experience to be in here, but fighters go through. It's a very natural feeling where it's like the things I'm the best at, somebody's able to figure it out and stop it, and it doesn't work on them. And it's like you have that like big doubt, and it's a real big mental hurdle to get over. I heard Sean O'Malley talk about it when he moved from Montana out to, I believe he's in Arizona right now. When he moved out there, he was like, I cried every single day after practice because, I was beating up everybody in Montana. I was winning all my fights, and I went into this room and I was getting destroyed every single day. And if you don't have that feeling before you get to this point, before you get to the UFC, then that's just like a huge mental obstacle to get over. And I feel bad for him that he had to go through it on that big stage, and where the audio is picked up so clearly because there's no audience, and it's spread all around the internet and people saying shitty things about him. But a lot of the people saying shitty things would have never gotten themselves in that cage in the first place, and wouldn't be able to overcome that mental hurdle because they don't know what he was feeling. Also, we don't know if he had like an injury going into this, and it's not just quitting. It's, granted, it's not something you see very often, but I really felt for him in that moment. And I say a lot of people talking shit on the internet have probably never stepped into a cage until I saw a comment from Dan Hooker, who tweeted that, imagine getting to the UFC just to find out that you're made of marshmallows. And I get he's trying to be cheeky and funny with that, but fuck Dan Hooker. You're a real bully and a real piece of shit for saying something like that to a guy who is going through this feeling for the first time on the biggest stage of his career in his 6th fight in the UFC. I mean, his 6th professional fight happens to be his UFC debut is what I meant. I thought that was really shitty. I thought that was the equivalent of like picking on somebody who's not a professional fighter, picking on somebody when they're at the lowest moment of their career. That's like a bullying move, and I don't vibe with that. I've never really had a problem with Dan Hooker before, but yeah, man, fuck that guy. I think I think you've proven that you're a smaller person than the guy is who quit on the stool by making a comment like that. And that's where I stand with that. And Dan Hooker may never hear me saying all this, but if he does, then that's fine. But yeah, Jeff, any other thoughts for Roxkoff here? I may have gotten a little too bleeding hard about it. I'm a pretty rough guy at the end of the day, but I felt for him here because I know the mental hurdle he was going through at that moment. And it sucks for him that he had to do it on such a big stage, but that's a risk you take when you take an opportunity like this fighting in the UFC.
Yeah, no, absolutely, dude. And I don't blame Max Roshkov here. Your first day at a new job, where you're not getting punched in the face is tough. I still remember my first day teaching and seeing that all the stuff that I learned in college and all the textbooks I read, they didn't help me. Like you said before, I had to learn on the job and stuff. And even now, I don't claim to be good at teaching. It's something that I enjoy doing. But, I feel for Max Roshkov too. He's a small. For lack of a better analogy here, he was a small fish being thrown into a big pond, and maybe he was going through that same stuff that Sean O'Malley talked about, where everything, stuff that you have gone to the well on, stuff that works because it's worked for you before, and here you are, and it's not working. That's got to be overwhelming for anybody. So I don't blame him at all for saying that he couldn't handle it. Like you said, a lot of people wouldn't have even stepped into that cage. With all the preparation in the world, they wouldn't have stepped into that cage. And I was going to say something else. And also, and I don't really blame his corner either for wanting to push him to push past that barrier, that wall that he kind of hit. But, he's going to learn from this. He's going to go back to the gym. For me personally, I felt like I learned a lot from my first jiu-jitsu competition. I knew what it felt like to be that tired or be that exhausted. And I kind of changed my training a little bit. So I know he's going to learn from this. And I think that Dan Hooker is no one to speak, man, because he was probably made out of marshmallows after Edson Barbosa beat up his body with all those body kicks when they fought each other.
Yeah, dude. Big respect to Dan Hooker as a fighter, but outside the cage kind of showed his true colors as a piece of shit. And as for all the people talking shit on the internet, it's like none of you would have gotten off the stool either. And the times in your life where you didn't get off the stool, metaphorically speaking, where you quit and gave up on something, not a lot of people know about it. You were able to do that privately. So back off the guy who had to do it on ESPN in his UFC debut. Because we all have these moments in our life, Jeff, where you don't want to get off the stool. You just want to quit. You just want to give up. You just want to throw in the towel. And you're able to do it without people knowing about it. Usually, if it's a job you feel like you can't do, if it's, being a parent and you just want to, you don't want to do it anymore, and you just make the decision to walk away because that's easier. You're able to do that and not take a lot of shit for it. So people are giving up and making a lot worse decisions than Max Roskopf had to make last night for himself. And that's that. We got a little. I usually don't get so riled up about things, Jeff, but here we are. Let's lighten things up a little bit and talk about Dan Hooker getting his face smashed in by Dustin Poirier next weekend. UFC on ESPN 12. This is the fight Hooker wanted. He called out Dustin Poirier. Be careful what you wish for, man. Hooker's got the range, and we know he hits hard. But Poirier's got the cleaner boxing technique and definitely superior grappling. We've seen him submit guys who nobody has submitted before. Give me your thoughts on this main event, Jeff.
Bill, I'm excited for this one, man. You can never count Dustin Poirier out, especially at lightweight, man. That's the division he beat Max Holloway at. Max Holloway, who was an excellent featherweight champion, or was. Definitely one of the best to do it in history. Man, I'd be worried if I were Dan Hooker, man. While Dan Hooker's pretty well rounded himself, I feel like Dustin Poirier's better at those things. His grappling's a little bit better. Boxing definitely a lot cleaner, a lot more technical. So I'm really excited for this main event, man. I think it's going to be fireworks. And the co-main event looks really good too.
Yeah, for sure. And I usually, Jeff, you know this, and the people listening know this, I don't like to say who I'm rooting for, or because I'm usually not. I'll let you guys know if I know somebody personally and I have a bias there. But definitely pulling for Dustin Poirier in this main event. And we got Mike Perry and Mickey Gall, like the fight we never knew we needed in our life. The guy who comes out to hey Mickey against the guy who has face tattoos. And it's really funny when you think about it that way. But technically speaking, this is an interesting matchup. Mickey Gall's a tough guy. He's hit some speed bumps in the UFC, but so is Mike Perry. Mike Perry, not the most technically sound fighter. Even the takedowns we've seen him attempt in the UFC, just like picking dudes up and slamming them down like he's in the WWE or something. Just a really powerful guy. Good striking when we see him patient in there. And he's got good grappling too. Hard to submit for sure. Hard to finish. He's real tough in there. Mickey Gall, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Jim Miller, I believe. So he's got legit grappling. How do you see this one going, Jeff?
Oh, I'm excited, man. I think that if it stays on the feet, I think it definitely goes well for Mike Perry. He's going to want to make it, a street fight, basically, whereas Mickey Gall wants to take it to the ground. So, classic grappler versus striker matchup here, which I'm really excited for. I love those two. And, Mike Perry is somebody who he can be hot or cold. So I'm really excited to see how he has handled his training going into this and how he approaches going with Mickey Gall. Because Mickey Gall is somebody that nobody wants to get on the ground with, man. We've seen him finish many a fighter with his ground game. And, Bill, I'm excited for this heavyweight bout too, man. John Volante versus Maurice Green, dude. Somebody's going to sleep in that fight. I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, for sure. John Volante making the move up to heavyweight. And, he's a guy who everybody always says, he's got this great wrestling background and he never seems to want to use it. He always wants to strike. It's going to be interesting to see him doing that against a guy like Maurice Green, who's a very good striker himself. Will he resort to that wrestling at heavyweight? Maybe he was holding back on it because of the weight he was cutting to make light heavyweight, and he didn't want to expend that energy wrestling. That's what you hear from a lot of guys. Like Justin Gaethje, he's like, I know how exhausting it is to wrestle. So if I feel like I can stand with a guy, I'm going to stand with him and, expend less energy. And that, that philosophy makes sense. Some people say it the other way. If I can get you down and hold you down, why am I going to bother standing and striking with you? It'll be interesting to see which way that one goes and how Volante looks at heavyweight. I'll tell you the sleeper fight on this card, Jeff, for me is Luis Pena against Kama Worthy. So Worthy in his last fight, his UFC debut, he knocks out Devontae Smith, who, is a big up and coming prospect. 15-6 as a pro. But he's got that big win in his UFC debut against a guy in Luis Pena who, has been around and been in some tough fights. His last fight with Matt Favola was awesome. He looked great in that fight. He's got some real tricky submissions. He's real slick on the bottom. He's doing submissions that like a lot of people have never even seen before. And then he's a really tough striker too. He's long and rangy. But not a whole lot known about this kid, Kama Worthy. So this is a fun one for me. Pena, I would imagine, is a big favorite here, but Worthy, can you really count him out after knocking out a guy like Devontae Smith in his UFC debut? So that's the fight to keep an eye on for me, Jeff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good pick, man. Luis Pena, like you said, really tough dude. Probably the favorite going into this one, just because I don't know a lot about Kama Worthy, but Devontae Smith's a huge feather in somebody's cap in this lightweight division. Bill, so I actually wanted to, I don't know if you know this, but I'm looking at this card on Wikipedia, and it says that Aspen Ladd and Sarah McMahon were actually scheduled to be on this card. But, dude, Aspen Ladd suffered a training injury where she tore her ACL and her MCL.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, how long do you think it would take her to recover from that? Because that sounds horrifying.
I mean, a normal person, that's a year. For a high level athlete who's going to do some responsible physical therapy, I've heard some crazy stories. 7 months, 8 months, something like that. I know our buddy Billy Quarantello tore his ACL, and he rehabbed himself really smartly. And if you go back and listen to Billy on this podcast, he talked about how he just couldn't sleep at night. He started waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then started going to the gym and working his upper body, and just kind of always stuck with that routine. So now he always wakes up 4 in the morning and goes to the gym, and then wasn't able to compete in MMA, but took a boxing fight in the meantime because he was able to box, but he wasn't able to grapple and stuff. Won his boxing debut. So, if she does it the smart way, she'll be able to bounce back in under a year. But that's unfortunate. Yeah, I'm looking at SureDog for this card, and it says Sarah McMahon is still on the card against unknown fighter, but that would have been a great fight.
Oh, absolutely.
Aspen Ladd. And then we got Kyle DeCow against Brendan Allen on the main card as well. That'll be a fun fight. And then we got a lot of unknown fighters on the prelims here, which, as we saw last week, Jeff, could result in fireworks. You never know. Maybe not, but I think worth watching for sure. You got a lot of hungry fighters on here, so I'm looking forward to this card. UFC on ESPN 12. This one will also be at the Apex in Las Vegas. And then I think we're on to Fight Island after that, no? In July?
Yeah, I think so.
It's cool. I like the Fight Island t-shirts almost as much as I like the MMA on the Rocks t-shirts that are available for purchase now from our our friends over at Rip Life One. If you guys want to get a hold of one, if you often find yourself over the top or under the influence or both, then it's a good shirt for you to be rocking. The link is in my pinned tweet on Twitter at MMA on the Rocks, or in my bio on Instagram. Try to make it as easy as possible for you guys. So, if you want to represent the show, go grab yourself a t-shirt. If not, I understand. A lot of people have reached out because they listen internationally, and with the taxes and the shipping and everything like that, it gets to be a real financial burden, and I definitely don't want to put anybody through, and I definitely understand. But if you still want to support the show, then leave us a review, leave us comments, share the episodes, help other people find it, so we can invite more people to the party here. Anything else you want to get off your chest, Jeff?
No, I think we hit everything. So just, to everybody out there who's doing their job as a father, happy Father's Day to you guys, and, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, man. You got to throw that caveat in there for everybody doing it right. Happy Father's Day. And, just be good to each other out there. And if you've been good to each other, then continue doing that. And if you've been an asshole, then, start being good to each other. No, I'll leave it at that. All right. I got some barbecuing to do for Father's Day here. Gonna have a nice day with the fam. Until next time. Oh, wait. If you want to get a hold of Jeff, I almost forgot. Animal_Wilson, Twitter and Instagram. You guys know how to get a hold of me. It's at MMA on the Rocks everywhere else. Until next time. Cheers, everybody. Goodbye.